premise of Darkness Falls is an eco-terrorist group trying to destroy the world's oil supply, and they figure out that they can do that with a bacteria that they've engineered that gets down into wells, destroys the reservoirs, and gums up the machinery that's used in extraction. And then it goes on to discuss sort of the race to stop that. My main character has kind of a tough background. He's really based on, very loosely, on a guy named Bjorn Lomborg who wrote a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist. And when that book came out, there was a huge backlash against him. So Aaron, he wrote a similar book about the environment. All his friends kind of turn their backs on him. His girlfriend dies at roughly the same time, and he becomes very bitter and ends up going to work for the oil industry, kind of as a, I'll get them kind of thing. As far as the oil supply goes, those are just the fun what-ifs of being a thriller writer. What if someone wiped out the oil supply? What exactly would happen, and how would that play out? That's where the idea of bacteria came from. They actually exist. They use them to clean up oil spills. And specifically, there's one called, and let's see if I can get this right, Geobacillus thermodenerificans that was found in a Chinese oil well about 3 years ago. It's very tough. It can live up to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. It eats oil, lives exclusively on oil. And the Chinese have completely sequenced its DNA so it can be modified to be more effective. The economic consequences of the oil supply getting cut off very quickly are really catastrophic. When I first looked into this, I thought, thriller writers pump up threats, obviously. We try to make them bigger and scarier than maybe they really would be. In this case, that's almost the opposite is true. I first looked into it and I thought, well, this would be annoying. I couldn't go get my bagel in the morning because I wouldn't have any gas. But there really would be no bagel because agriculture is incredibly dependent on oil. Also, on average, food travels about 1,500 miles before it hits your plate. So unless you happen to live very close to a farm, where would you get food? And there's an enormous sort of cascade effect. And it just kind of goes on and on and on. And when people started getting hungry, there would probably be chaos. You'd have no police because they wouldn't be mobile. Their cars wouldn't work anymore. And then in my scenario, if you have a situation where this stuff were to potentially go airborne, well, then you have a problem with oil that lubricates machinery. So that's the end of all machinery. As our oil supplies dwindle, which they will do naturally eventually, it would be a real disaster.